about a little over $500,000 in debt. Thank you for that reminder. We paid the, I'm sorry? More than that?
It was 7.
460 on line of credit and another 180 credit card debt.
So 460 on the line of credit and 180 on credit card debt? So $640,000 in total debt. I didn't bring my notes on this, so thank you, Jennifer.
Jennifer was the treasurer.
Yes, Jennifer was the treasurer. Or is the treasurer. I will tell you, last night they took Jennifer off the accounts.
Yes, gone.
They took our deputy treasurer off the accounts.
I didn't know Nintendo could make those kind of noises. Welcome, everybody, to the Rescue Michigan stream. As some of you may know, regular viewers of the show might know, we are very limited in what kinds of music we are allowed to use. Basically, it's limited to the world of video games. And I was looking for happy victory music to celebrate what happened at the state convention yesterday. And we got some wonderful guests to talk about all of the action that happened in Grand Rapids. So,
there's my credential.
Warren, I don't see you, buddy, but we do hear you. So yeah.
Oh, sorry, guys.
And folks, friends of the show might remember Warren Carpenter, who apparently has a new title with the Michigan Republican Party. I'm hearing on the internets that your title, Warren, is finance chair of the state party, although it might be, it may be auditor general, a more accurate term for what your new job at the state party shall be.
Yeah, so I was appointed by Ambassador and Chairman Pete Hoekstra on the 29th to the finance chair position. So I'm super excited to help the party out in any way I can. It's a pleasure to return to the state committee under new leadership, and I'm blessed to be thought of. So, yep, there it is.
Excellent. Well, let me introduce our other guest tonight as well. First time on the show, but a longtime friend of mine, Stephanie Jacobson. From up north, who will probably give us some of the story about what happened in the first district, where what we just saw before the stream began was a strange event that occurred in Houghton Lake, Michigan, which is a very long ways away from Grand Rapids. And I guess some of the delegates there found out that, they had a good time when they were there, but then they ended up having a bad time because it turns out that all the things they did, for some reason, were not recognized by the state party and won't be recognized by the RNC. And also, I don't know if it's the first time on the show, but Kelly Sackett, you are the chair of the Kalamazoo County GOP. Protestations to the contrary notwithstanding. And we can talk about what's been happening in your case if you like, or if you don't want to, that's fine too. I know parties of the cases don't like to talk about them often, but you were also the chair, if I'm not mistaken, of the 4th District Caucus at the district conventions that were held yesterday in Grand Rapids. So welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Adam.
And of course, Scott McMahon, Gonzo journalist who was on the scene at the convention, live tweeting. And we'll talk about all the things that Scott observed at the convention. We have Todd Gilman, who is a member of the state committee, member of the budget committee, returning to the show, talk about the state committee meeting that happened after the state convention, which there's a lot of rumors about what that state committee is going to do, because after all, Kristina Karamo supporters had the majority. And when that state committee was going to reconvene for the first time under Pete Hoekstra, oh boy, he was going to be in big trouble. But I guess that's not exactly what happened. Is it, Todd?
No, not at all. It was actually like 3 or 4 people that were causing a disturbance. The KK supporters were kind of quiet.
Nice. And of course, Patty P., co-host of the show. Welcome, Patty, from the 6th District, the Wayne 6th chair, and Matt Wilk, former Wayne 6th chair and national delegate. Congratulations, Matt. Good to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
We were in a bit of a radio silent mode for this past week. After Tuesday, we did have to go live last Tuesday to talk about the decision in Kent County. But after that, we made a strategic decision to shut up and let some of those Karamo supporters dig their own graves and not give them the ideas about what we might and might not want them to do. And they kind of came through in a big way. They decided to disenfranchise themselves, as Randy says. Yes, they did. And whole counties didn't show up. So I guess we'll maybe start with that. Or Should we start there? Or we should talk about the Sheboygan case, maybe? Let me
Well,
briefly
no,
touch
I want to start. I'd like you to start with one thing. You've demonstrated, and Scott has demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt how the media runs with a narrative, especially about Republicans. Can anybody tell me who Jeff Hargis is?
I've never
Jeff
heard of him.
Hargis is a precinct delegate, the district delegate for precinct 5, who had a heart attack in the hallway outside during the convention. On site was Dr. Rob Steele, who is our national committee man and was reelected. Dr. Steele performed CPR until paramedics got there. And I'm happy to report that Jeff did as well as could be expected. You did not read that in the news. You did not read that in the free press. You certainly didn't read it in any national news, even though each of those people walked by that incident as it was going on.
Yeah.
To be fair, Jonathan Osting did make a post in that, and I believe in whatever paper he writes for, I think he's an editor now. He got a promotion last week or 2 weeks ago.
Right.
But Osting did write a letter or an article about that.
Right. Very, very narrowly covered.
Yeah,
certainly
correct,
not in the mainstream media.
No.
Well, and also today, Dr. Rob Steele texted me and said, let's not forget that Dr. Sherry O'Donnell was there assisting as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool that I said, well, was Nikki Schneider there? Because she's also a nurse who was up there too in that same area. So yes.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
Very
and
cool.
congratulations to Rob Steele for winning his second term in maybe it's his third term actually on the RNC. But for those who don't know the story of his opponent, Ralph Rebant, some might remember he came in 5th in a field of 5 for governor in 2022 and decided the very first thing he wanted to do was to challenge Tudor Dixon's own pick for lieutenant governor, so that had he succeeded, it would have been a gigantic embarrassment, devastation for her campaign. Biggest assist for Gretchen Whitmer would have been in that election year is him doing that. That was what he chose to do. He did not succeed in defeating Rob Steele. So see you later. See you next time, Ralph.
Can I say something about that, Adam?
Yeah.
Because Ralph is from my area and I'm familiar with him, but I'm getting a little concerned about a pattern I'm starting to see. And I took the Shane Hernandez thing kind of personally too, because I thought it was a fantastic pick. The ticket was weak on legislative experience, and Shane had a lot. I knew he did great work. I knew his chief of staff, and I knew how hard he worked as head of transportation, and he had a really good voting record. And I feel like now with the Rob Steele challenge, we have a pattern where this gentleman is picking the most conservative people on our tickets or in the party and going after them. I mean, that's kind of what the actions show. Maybe that can be something Scott looks into. So
yeah. Curtis
it's
Clark
kind of
says,
disturbing.
what has Rob Steele done for you? Well, besides being my friend's cardiologist for many years and keeping him alive for extending Tony DeMont's life for quite a few years, he also actually is the reason why we are sending as many national delegates to the RNC as we are, because he was absolutely critical in shepherding that plan through. The Democrats tried to screw us out of our national delegation by scheduling the primary in February. And, some of us actually sounded alarmed about this early on, but Rob Steele worked hand in hand with the RNC to make sure that they came up with an alternative that followed the rules so that we got to send 55 national delegates to Milwaukee. Because had we not, we would have been penalized. I think we would have lost 40 of them, like 80% of our national delegation.
Does Curtis Clark even know what the job is of the RNC National Committee man and woman? I mean, have we actually seen it out there, what their job title is and what their responsibilities are? Because I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a clue.
Yeah.
I was at Mackinac conference and Rob Steele gave a dynamite presentation about what the party, what the RNC committee man does. And he's just very welcoming to all people in the party. And I think he was probably one of the elected officials that actually went to the Mackinac conference and really prepared and was really genuine. And I know him back from the Tea Party days when he ran for U of M Region. And I think he won that position. And he's always been a real champion. And I think he was very good on COVID as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna be less bullish on Rob Steele. I voted for Rob. I'm absolutely less bullish on Rob Steele after some things that I found out. and we can discuss those at another day.
Okay. If you want to discuss them another time, we can.
I would
Anyway.
say that one of the most, in my view, one of the most significant events of last week, in a week that was just so loaded with significant events, was the leaking of the Constitution document that showed that their intention was to, in the words of the document, that the party was to be the most significant and important priority and be higher in priority than anything in a delegate's personal life, which is party above all, party above God, party above family. Like this is truly evil what this organization was doing. And that anyone that expressed it truly said anyone who expressed disloyalty would be removed. This is not the Republican Party that these people support. And I think that anybody that would support that should have no place in the party. And so on that basis alone, I think that Rob Steele's election was a victory.
Yeah. I agree with that. I guess I'll get into it real quick, right? He was he was on the opposite side of some decisions that I think in the credentialing committee that were no-brainers. For me personally, I mean, I take the tack that the court victory was the final victory for us. All right. And in so from that moment forward, my job in the party is to unite the party. Right. I know there's a lot of people on the other side of the issues that are still kind of mind captured in a lot of these things. But for me, it was about making sure that any delegation that I could get seated, right, for the convention, I wanted seated, because the people that made the decisions for these individuals were not them themselves. It was their county chairs or their county secretaries or their leaders in certain districts that were the ones that stole their voice. That for me is a malfeasance, and it's just it's an unforgivable sin as being a Republican, right? To say that we wouldn't expend every opportunity to have the delegates themselves not disenfranchised, even if we had to, even if we had to make an exception. My idea was after the court case that we could have had a 24-hour what I would call amnesty window, right, for anybody else, and I think that as I was whipping kind of some of the people on the credentialing committee for this opportunity, which I think would have probably calmed a lot of the after effect that we're still gonna, because now we're gonna get reverberations, right? Now we've given these people a talking point that it's us that kept them out, right? Not the dereliction of duty of the people who were supposed to turn in the appropriate documentation. It allows them to create a narrative that we're here to steal votes and we're tyrants and all these things, and that's not what I want for the ambassador and the chairman, right? My job is to make sure that he's informed, and all of our jobs are to make sure that he's informed with the best information to make the best decisions. And in my mind, giving these people the amnesty would have provided them the opportunity. Some of them still wouldn't have done it, right? But we could have taken that as a win for the administration. And Rob Steele vehemently opposed that idea in the credentials committee and raised a big stink about it, and rightly so. I mean, those people probably would have voted for Ralph, but Rob won by overwhelming numbers. And the next situation was the Hillsdale situation, and I know that Todd is somewhat familiar with this because he was around some of the conversations. I came up to Matt Wilkes' room and I pulled aside Andy Siebold, Tim Ross. I called Norm Schinkel, right? And again, this is a situation that if there wasn't this agreement that was made on Saturday morning that I was part of to help make this agreement happen, that we could have been in contempt of court again. The same contempt of court from the same judge, from the same circuit in Hillsdale that Kristina was held in contempt for in December 28th, right? And he was vehemently opposed to seating the appropriate delegation that's recognized by the BOE and the Statement of Organization, the same thing that Kelly Sackett is going through right now in Kalamazoo. So he's on the wrong side of two issues in a week. That to me,
I'll take a different. I'll take a very, very different tack. As one of the,
I just want to finish my statement, right?
Sure.
And this is what I'm going to say. This is connected to TPUSA, right? This is Team TPUSA. This isn't Team MIGOP. And that's my issue. When people are signing contracts with separate organizations to be representatives of our state party, but are doing it on behalf of another organization and having that organization fund their election campaigns and so on and so forth. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying Rob's a bad guy. Love Rob, right? Love Rob personally. Not happy with a couple decisions I've seen come down the pipe very recently.
Warren, do you know the contract that was signed between the RNC and Turning Point Action? Because Rob Steele talked about them signing a contract, and I don't know what it was. What is this contract?
I don't have it yet, but I'm gonna get my greasy little hands on it. But that's my point, right? Like, so we've got committee people. So now there's a dust up about whether or not HEMA had a majority, and then Robert's rules. So Rob also brought that challenge to the Trump parliamentarians that were on site, right? Because Bernadette's on Team TPUSA, right? They want to have those victories so they have that representation. And there's no secret about what TPUSA is trying to do for the RNC, right? They're trying to get the majority in it to take it over, right? Just like we would do if it was a county or if it was a state party or a district. And that's well within their rights. But people need to understand that, right? There needs to be clarity behind these things, right? We've got people that are running for these positions, and they're wearing NASCAR suits, right? They've got endorsement badges on them, that have paid for their, for them to have this platform or to go here or to speak here. And for me, that's I call balls and strikes, dude. Nobody's safe from me.
I have a little input on the Hillsdale thing because I'm in District 5. One of the things that really bothered me is, well, one, I didn't get in the middle because, one, me and Warren are a little bit on different sides on this, and I love Warren. Me and John Smith are very tight, but Brent Leiniger, the person who started all this stuff, or the leader of the people who started all this stuff, didn't even show up. Wasn't even there Friday morning or Saturday morning. And he wasn't there to fight on the floor. Because from what I was told, that it was going to be determined on the district convention floor, which would have been fine. But he didn't even show up. They only had 4 people show up. And they left after the first vote. So they started all this stuff, and then they weren't there. They started all this turmoil, and then they weren't there. I don't understand that. And we disavowed them all last year, and they kept going. And I respect that. If you're gonna fight, and I respect that. But show up. Don't start this stuff and not show up. And I never had any respect for the man anyways, but I totally lost respect for their cause after you don't show up and stand up for what you believe in.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Todd, I also am a friend of John Smith. I'm also a friend of yours. My position in fighting this or getting involved in it had nothing to do with any of the parties or the justification or how we got here. It strictly had to do with the administration being put in a situation where if Susie or Brent went back to John Lauterbach and said, John, we want you to file a contempt of charge claim on these people because they continue to fly in the face of the court order, this would be a slam dunk case. We got a contempt charge for not removing a name from an email. Then you're going to tell me you're not going to seat these people at the actual recognized convention? It would be an immediate contempt charge for Pete.
No, I understand that. That's why I try to stay out of it, because I'm not a legal expert. I'm not Matt Wilk. I when it comes to stuff like this, I have loyalty to the party, but I also have loyalty to you, Warren, and I have loyalty to John, and I have loyalty to my friends, and those people in Hillsdale are my friends. They're my neighbors. So I try to stay out of that chaos.
Yeah,
I'm going to go to Matt Wilk to give him an opportunity because you want to say something, and then I'm going to move on.
I just the reason these are two very different situations. What most people have heard about, and then five existed for a long time. Really didn't have very much to do with Kristina at all, except for her picking a side one way or the other. I don't think that wasn't related to her. To Warren's larger point about coming together, we've been asked a lot, Patty and myself and Kelly and a bunch of people, how do you handle this going forward? And the answer that I gave was this: if you were lied to, we're probably going to welcome you home. Okay, that's not your fault. But if you were one of the liars, and there's a lot of them, you need to be held to account. So to give a blanket amnesty and watch Dan Bonamy and Ken Byer and Joel Studebaker march back in and take things over, that is not the correct answer, because these people should not be treated the same way that the people who were lied to are treated. They may have the people that they lied to, and we welcome them home. And I watched the Dan Bonamy video aghast at just the lies per minute. I was going to do like a little ding every time he made a lie. You couldn't even hear what he was saying because it was all dinging. And they're lying to these people, and they're all lapping it up. And it's not their fault that Dan Bonamy's lying to them, and whoever else was speaking in the video was lying to them. It's not their fault.
Yeah, I heard Hoekstra was taking lists from anybody that was willing to give them to him from those counties, not just the convention secretaries. But I think that it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I get it. I get there's different positions on it, and the ambassador that's a tough way to have to start your thing, but you have to hold these people to account. People that were calling every one of us on this, and to this day, all kinds of nasty names, and running with it and sharing it within their social network. The liars need to be held account. If you were lied to, we'll bring it back.
All right. Speaking of that, I really get on to another topic here.
Go ahead.
And actually, Jonathan gave me a nice little segue, saying Samantha Strayer, Buttercup Samantha Strayer needs to go, biggest liar of them all. And I'll tell you a story of she's in our county convention. I had a guy who's an old friend of mine, not especially active. He's a precinct delegate. He came to that convention. He told me a story about Samantha Strayer, who literally, she tore up a slate card that was given to him, and then hands him another one, says, these are the exact same people on. He's like, wait a minute, I'm not on this one. I was on that other one. Like, and he was furious. He didn't know who she was. He's like, she lies in my face. Anyway, I bring this up because we had a little decision on Tuesday in the Kent County Courthouse that said that Kristina Karamo and her agents are not allowed to pose as the state party anymore. And unfortunately, not one day later, we got this email blast from a number of people forward this to me. This is from communications@migop.org. And I bring up Samantha because, your style is recognizable. Like I got a text from a guy out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in a while. Says, hope you're well. I got a communication from Campaign for Liberty a few days ago. I wondered if that was your work. I had to do with an extension of 702. I was like, yeah, I've been writing for them for the past 2 years. How'd you know? And he goes, because when I saw the word bogeyman, I laughed and said, that sounds like Adam. You can tell people by their style. And I can tell you, this has Samantha Strayer's fingerprints all over it. She, of course, actually serves as some communications role in the state party. This was the email that was sent out the day after the Kent County decision. One party, one purpose. Dear district convention delegates and alternates. Well. What an interesting week, year, decade it's been, eh? As time goes by and people's true characters emerge, it becomes much clearer what is really going on and what is really at stake. Nothing less than the preservation of our lives and the very freedoms that make those lives worth living. Anyway, blah, 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 yada, 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 bullshit. Sent out from the MIGOP, P.O. Box 206, Grand Rapids, Michigan, from the MIGOP communications team. Well, that would seem to be contempt of court. And by the way, that is, of course, far from the only thing that has come from the state party in the past week. There was also this, which is still live right now. This is something you guys can verify on your very own computers at home. This is on the state party's website. Just click on the convention link, and there it is. One party, one purpose, Huntington Place. There's Kristina Karamo pictured right there. And hey, Matt, what do you think about, the potential liability that, I don't know, web developers, communications directors, people that served under Kristina, what do you think? They couldn't possibly get in any trouble for an order that only applied to Kristina, can they?
Yes. So judges don't like that. Judges don't like when they ask something to be stopped or to make an order to be stopped for you to circumvent that order by having somebody else do the same thing. So in fact, in Hillsdale, that Kristina tried to make that line of argument. It wasn't me. I didn't do the website, blah, 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 blah. The judge said, that's nice, but you're the boss. So therefore you're fine and the party is fine and everything. So in this particular case, I would expect they've probably received a letter, because judges like to see that you're trying to resolve your dispute outside of the court before you go to the court. and they probably give them a very short period of time. It's probably much, and Warren, you're not going to answer this question. Okay. They probably got a short period of time to respond, 24 hours, 48 hours, you must do X or Y. When that time period lapses, whenever that is, I have not received a copy of this. This is all supposition on my part. Then they will go march back into court and say, Your Honor, we gave him 48 hours. This is your order. You still have jurisdiction of this case. And he might drag people back in there. Now, understand that opens up a whole new line of testimony, because now the testimony is about the violation of the order. So let's say, for example, you're on the MIGOP communications team. You can get called in to account. You can be held in contempt. Were you aware of the order? You probably were.
Well, I mean, it just says here, right here, the judge was wrong in this very same email.
Yeah,
we won the day, as we should have. So, and this is, it's not like there's been any kind of coordinated effort to delegitimize this judge, is there? I certainly have not seen anything on Telegram or social media or people filing complaints with the Judicial Commission or anything of that nature that might get anybody in any with the court.
So I actually have a Telegram message from Samantha Strayer telling people in a certain chat group to look out or be on the lookout, BOLO for a communication coming out very soon. And then someone said, I didn't get it in my inbox. And then Strayer responds, it's coming soon. So there's no getting around this.
All right. It's no. And again, this goes back to the same thing, the same comment, the same problem is they think all they're doing is running a campaign and you can just lie and skate your way through it. You are not any longer. You are now subject to multiple judges' orders. I humbly suggest if you're watching this show, now is a good time to listen. I will tell you, when we're talking about the 5th, I had a conversation confidentially with some members of the dispute there and asked what they should do. And I said, number one is you comply with the judge's orders, because that is not a line you want to cross. Kristina has crossed that line a million times, and that's because she is taking advice. I was listening to Dan Bonamy's things. He said, we brought it by the lawyers, plural. And I'm thinking to myself,
oh, yeah. Didn't I saw something from Bonamy like a day or so ago saying I ran it by the general counsel's office. I'm like, you mean the former lawyer? Does he still have an office? Who's paying for that office?
Right. Well, in this particular video, he says we ran it by the lawyers. There aren't lawyers. There's only one lawyer, Dan Hartman. There's one fake lawyer, Jim Coppus, who never passed the bar or never got admitted. Sorry for a phrase. He never got admitted to the bar because he failed the character and fitness portion. And then there was Robert Owens, who was a member of the bar in Ohio and was disbarred for stealing $100,000 from a client. So what lawyers, Dan, were you talking to? Who advised you on this matter? And guess what? The giving of legal advice as a non-lawyer is called the unauthorized practice of law, which was alleged in Jim Coppus's statement by the Board of Law Examiners twice that he had to explain away or try to explain away and failed ultimately.
Yeah, it went all the way to the Supreme Court for him and they denied him. Yeah, he took it all the way to the top and they said no.
Correct. But anyway, my point is this is not a line you cross. You listen to what the judge says. And yes, Adam, if you are a part of that team and you think playing fast and loose with this, it wasn't me. I wasn't doing it. Were you aware the court order existed? Oh, you are, because you wrote about the court order. So no, you didn't comply with it either.
Yeah. All right. I want to go to Kelly and to Steph and talk about some of the district caucus events. But since there are some folks in the chat who are saying, move on and grow up and November's around the corner. Well, look, folks, hey, we're an informational program. But I will say this, because I talked to someone at the convention who was a fan of the show and says, you got to lighten up, or you use too many jokes. You're too funny. And it's not good for people. My instinct is always like, don't take other people's recommendations on things. But I think she was very, very concerned. And she expressed that, as I kind of understood it, the issue she had was she tries to show people the show to get them to come to their senses on some of these things, and it doesn't work. But the issue is, first off, I don't think reason works with them either. Like, that's the problem with cults. They don't listen to reason. The other thing too is, and we talked about this previously, like, you know, humor is important. You got to have some levity over the situation, and you know, getting over. Yeah, Heather Dow says it perfectly. You have to laugh or you'll cry.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, there is that. And besides that too, you know, I can't not be funny. Like, that's, I mean, I often fail at it, but I can't help but try. So that's just kind of the way that's going to go. And there's going to be some things watching. Suzanne says, I see a whopping 53 watching. Well, guess what, Suzanne? There's other people watching on many other platforms. So in whatever, fine, you're welcome to leave. So if you think I don't make any difference, well, then why are you here complaining about me? Anyway, so Kelly, congratulations on sharing your district caucus. And I understand you guys had some fun there. Now, this is, of course, Ken Byers' home district, but he wasn't there for some reason. So how'd it go, Kelly?
So it went really well, actually. In the beginning, there were a few people that tried to make some motions. Thankfully, we had a parliamentarian that the MRP had provided for us. He was in the room the whole time. And I just gavelled through it, you know, and we got past that. I mean, literally all the news people were in our room in the beginning. And you know, I was kind of just had to not even pay attention to that. And all of a sudden the Fox News reporter comes up and puts his microphone right on my podium. And I was like, what do they think is going to happen in here, right? Like, is there some kind of major firework going to happen? And all of a sudden I went right into the vote for president, and we did a standing vote, counted everybody, but really when you know the room number and you have the Haley voters stand up, you pretty much know what's left. And the room erupted into major cheering for Trump, and that went on for a little bit of time. And that was actually the video clip that they used.
Yeah, by the way, congrats to Donald Trump for winning the convention.
Absolutely.
Wow. He only got 3/4 of the delegates from the primary election because of the Democrats crossing over. But it just goes to show you, folks, how great. I mean, and again, some of us foresaw that there was going to be a problem with the Democrats voting in our primaries.
Yeah.
And we got way ahead of that and made sure that that was going to be minimized, and it went over very well. I'm sorry, Kelly, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh,
and
you're
I also
fine. No, it was so it went very well. You know, there were
this resolution you guys passed.
Oh yes.
So I'll make this bigger.
At the very end.
Okay. Up from the ashes was the theme of the convention, which is awesome. But yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your narrative. Kelly, go ahead.
No, it was, you know, the parliamentarian leaned over to the gentleman who made the motion for this. And he said, I feel like this is a therapy session, because we had people come up and of course, there were 2 people that spoke in favor of Ken Byer, and everybody else that came up gave pretty horrifying stories about him. And yes, it was, I think, very fitting for a lot of people for it to be this way. And this passed with a extreme majority in the room.
Yep. Yeah, in my district, I think it was all but 1 or 2 people voted for Trump, and the one or 2 went for Nikki Haley, which, you know, is what it is. Not a big deal.
Yeah, did I say Haley? I meant Nikki Haley. Wow, I said Haley earlier. I think we had 5. I think we might have had 4 or 5 people stand for her, but everybody else was for Trump. No, I mean, you know, I got thrown into this kind of last minute. I never got the packet for the district chairs, and my vice chair actually put together a script for me, and it all worked out perfectly. So I was extremely happy and extremely tired in the end. So.
Yeah, conventions are always very tiring. Ron Picard says the Democrats trying to screw us with the February primary ended up costing Nikki Haley delegates. Yep. Good job, Democrats. There you go. Maggie says don't change a thing. Thank you, Maggie. Appreciate that. All right, so now this resolution that you guys passed, Kelly, which it's funny because I think some of our other district caucuses might have thought to pass some resolutions if they realized they could, but they didn't. So we have this. Whereas, based on the fomenting of division, personal attacks, and misinformation spread by Ken Byer and Sabrina Pritchett Evans, and the fact that they are not present today and in general have failed to fulfill their duties, now therefore be it resolved that this 4th District Caucus is properly credentialed, hereby directs the 4th District Executive Committee to immediately begin disciplinary proceedings to remove Ken Byer as District Chair and Sabrina Pritchett Evans as District Vice Chair. Be it further resolved that this shall serve as this caucus's vote of no confidence in Ken Byer and Sabrina Pritchett Evans, as adopted. Bam. So how'd that go, Kelly? Did that pass?
It did. It passed. It passed extremely well, actually. Probably, I would say, maybe a third of the room that voted against it. So we were
It's
very
like 2 to
happy.
1. That's huge. And
Yep.
I heard Ken Byer actually did show up at some point. They had their little event in Battle Creek, which is not all that far from Grand Rapids. I guess they came over later. Is that what happened?
Yes, that's absolutely what happened. And he carried in his box of ballots and expected them to be credentialed, which is quite funny since where's the chain of custody in any of that? And and I believe that when it was brought to the floor of the state committee meeting, that they tried to say that the original document said that it had to be held in Detroit, the binding resolution. And I guess Kim Harris pulled out the big binder and couldn't find where it said Detroit anywhere. And it was
If it said
out of
Detroit,
order.
why were they in Battle Creek?
Exactly right. So basically they were saying, no, we didn't have to be under one roof. And you know darn well that that's what the RNC, only thing that they said, that we had to be under one roof together.
Correct.
And so, you know, and honestly, they had the other Kalamazoo faction at their convention voting. And if you watch Ken Byer's video from Friday, where he talked about the 24 disenfranchised counties, and he listed them on his computer screen, lo and behold, Kalamazoo was not on there. So think about that one. That meant Kalamazoo was credentialed for Grand Rapids, and yet he allowed 39 delegates from Kalamazoo County to vote in his other convention and thought that those votes should be counted.
And this,
So,
and this is the second time. This is the
And-
second time where if they had showed up,
Right.
they would have gotten their voices heard. Instead, they listen. This is again the liars versus the lied to distinction.
Yeah.
The liars
Correct.
told them, you can go to Battle Creek or Houghton Lake, as you'll get to, and your votes will count because we're the real convention.
oh, today Sabrina posted on Facebook that exact thing. And she literally said, the results from the legitimate Michigan Republican Party District 4 caucus held in Battle Creek. And then she listed the delegates for national convention, you know, Ken Byer, Joel Studebaker, Ron Reister, and then the alternates. And oh, by the way, I also was elected to be an RNC delegate.
That's
So,
although it's sad because I know Ron Reister from he's like Ron Paul 2008.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
sad to see him in this camp.
you realize that is a gentleman who wrote a letter to the judge in our case in Kalamazoo County. He wrote an email to the judge. Who does that with an active court case?
Yeah, good question. Sad, I mean, I'm laughing, but it is very sad. It's very sad when people get taken in by these things. Anyway, so Stephanie, you are from the 1st district. You live in, I think, Gaylord, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And that district is like all of the UP and a good chunk of the Lower Peninsula, something like 30 some counties. And I saw this. It's an enormous district, and I saw this on Facebook. This is from the first. Let me try to zoom in on this. Make this a little bigger. 1st Congressional District, Republican Party of Michigan. And then they put official in quotes. I don't know why they did that, but that's their Facebook group. And they have this this map here, which has a lot of the 1st District colored in. And also looks like Gratiot County, Genesee, and Oakland County. I'm not sure why, but do you know what we're looking at here?
I believe that is the counties that chose to go to the Houghton Lake convention. or
Yeah,
were
I don't
not
think Oakland County actually
credentialed
did, but that's what they're
for
claiming, I
Grand
guess. So,
Rapids. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So with Trump, I don't know.
Yeah, that makes it official.
I guess so.
This is apparently what they sent in. They said we went to Houghton Lake. Our delegates are as patriotic as they come. They voted for Trump 134-0. So there you go, folks. Obviously, the Karamo faction is more patriotic because Haley got 0 votes. RNC committee. This doesn't quite look like an official tally since they don't have any numbers for 3 of the other candidates for Republican National Committee man, committee woman. And then here's the people that they have listed as delegates to the RNC convention. And lo and behold, Dan Bonamy is in first place. And there you go. So out of 134 voting delegates, which I assume is their count, but who knows? This is what they apparently showed up with and says these are the people that we've decided. Like, what about because you were in Grand Rapids, like
Yes.
the actual place you're supposed to be.
Yeah, and we also went 100% for Trump too.
Go ahead. I'm
No.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we also voted in Grand Rapids 100% for Trump, except interestingly enough, and I don't really understand why, so maybe someone on the panel can give some insight into this. Dan Hartman made mention after we did the standing vote that he wanted to be counted as present instead of voting for Trump. So a lot of people have been reading stuff into that. I don't know what it means personally, but that's what he chose to do when he was there. If you want, I'll tell you a little bit about our convention.
Yes, please do. But just real quick though, so he didn't vote for Trump.
No,
but he did want to vote present so that the world would know that he was in Grand Rapids. Why wasn't he in Houghton Lake? That's so strange.
He did that for a very specific reason, because he's still alleging that he's the general counsel. As general counsel, as an officer, he would be an at-large to the district convention. I'm guessing, without knowing, he probably wasn't elected at his county convention to go because he was at-large. There would be no need to be. So he was there, and he wanted to keep up with the appearances that he's really the true general counsel. Because recall, when the judge ruled in Kent County, they didn't just say Kristina is not the chair. They said the meeting on January 6th was proper. The first thing that was done in the meeting January 6th was to remove Kristina. The thing right after that, which actually had almost universal support, was remove Dan Hartman.
Okay.
And Jim Kopis. And to cancel the January 13th meeting, which nullifies everything that happened there too.
Right.
Yeah. So our convention was relatively calm as well. It was, as you can see, there was a large number of our delegates that chose to go to Houghton Lake. There's a little kerfluffle about who's the chair in the first district, because they had actually had a meeting. And from what there's some question about whether that meeting was properly called or not, to remove our chair, Sue Aller, and put in Dare Rendon as chair. So she called the convention thing at Houghton Lake. But for all intents and purposes, the Hoekstra the Hoekstra administration has recognized Sue. And so her vice chair didn't want to do it. So we elected she appointed someone, Jesse Assimer from Alpena area, to chair the meeting. And he did a really good job. He's very respectful. He's very calm. He used to be my nemesis during the Tea Party days. But we've kind of buried the hatchet since then. So he did a really good job making sure everybody's questions were answered and everyone understood what was going on. We had 57 credentialed delegates. We right away, when we sat down, we kind of did the basic things. And then we had Dan Hartman made a motion to recognize the Charlevoix delegation, which apparently had not gone to Houghton Lake and had come to Grand Rapids, but had not turned in their credentials to the administration by the deadline. And so they appealed to the body to recognize those delegates, and we took a vote, and the body voted 23 yes to bring them in and recognize them, and to 33 no's, with 2 voting present. So they were not recognized. we moved on. But the point I want to make to people is someone pointed out to me, I do know for a fact that there was a lot of chairs in the first that maybe didn't send things in a timely manner to both administrations. And I think that was a political calculation. You know, they were trying to make a political statement. Maybe they were waiting for the court date, but there was a rule there that said you had to get them in within a certain amount of time. So, you know, we had a lot of groups that were not credentialed, but interestingly enough, the Hoekstra administration was taking the lists of delegates from whoever had them, because they called me and said, we don't know what your chair is going to do. Do you know which delegates were, you know, which delegates were elected? And I had the list. We only have 8 delegates. So it's not like these big counties where, you know, you have hundreds of delegates. And so I just submitted the names. Our secretary and chair submitted the names to both the Karamo people and the Hoekstra people. So our delegates were recognized. Grand Traverse, a friend of mine, a friend of yours, Adam Heather-Sroney, submitted their delegates to Grand Rapids. So they were all credentialed. And apparently Leelanau was credentialed as well. And like Matt said, this is the 3rd time now that they've sent people elsewhere. Had those delegates shown up and voted, they would have won that vote to seat those Charlevoix people. There was 26 Grand Traverse delegates, 7 Leelanau delegates, and 8 from Otsego. They would have got 7 of those votes. And they would have won that vote to seat the Charlevoix people. So it really is a numbers game. There's not a lot of emotion in it. I was more concerned about a large body showing up. I know the first was very supportive of Dan's, well, I don't know, whoever's original proposal to put the election of people in the hands of the delegates. I know that idea was very popular in Otsego County, and I was really worried about that. I was also worried about, you know, a resolution of support for Kristina Karamo or some, you know, just some other things that I didn't necessarily want to get into. And so that's kind of where I was. But yeah, I mean, we were getting, and the first is kind of like so insulated from information. I feel like we only are getting one side, and it's really hard. I've talked to a lot of delegates that are really confused. You know, Go to Detroit was for a long time after the, you know, leading up to the court ruling. I think even after the court ruling, and then on March 1st, Detroit's canceled. Then Go to Houghton Lake. Nobody, people are just really confused, and I'm hoping that maybe now that this is done, you know, we can get some clarity. But numbers matter, and you know, if you make a political calculation and it doesn't work out, you just got to go, golly gee, what can I do next time? You know, and you got to show up. So.
One thing I meant to mention earlier in the show, but we skipped over it because there's so much else to talk about. But there was actually another court decision this week. This was from Sheboygan, where up north there was a lawsuit filed against the Michigan Republican State Committee, Angela Gillespie and Pete Hoekstra, by Larry Hull, John Studer, Rick Silva, Dan Bonamy, Roxanne Duford, Dare Rendon, Brendan Moyer, Robert Netzel, Ken Byer, Ruth Sirachman, Harry Sawicki, Dan Harrington, John Shout, and Daniel J. Hartman. We've heard some of these names before, haven't we? Dare Rendon, Dan Hartman, Dan Bonamy. And here is this very, very quick decision. There was a motion made immediately for a restraining order in the lawsuit. And this document, actually, without reading through the original complaint or the motion, this makes it very clear exactly what happened. February 29th. So this was... let's see, that would have been Thursday. Right. Thursday before the convention. The Republican State Convention is scheduled for March 2nd, 2 days from today. Plaintiffs ask this court to determine its location, Sheboygan. The convention has previously been scheduled to be held at a location in Detroit, but a controversy arose about who was the chair. One faction stated Karamo was ousted and replaced by Pete Hoekstra. Another faction said Karamo remained the legitimate chair. 2 days ago, the Kent County Circuit Court issued a preliminary injunction ruling that Karamo was removed as chair on January 6th and retroactively invalidating any action she took after that date, purporting to act as chair. Chairman Hoekstra has apparently moved the location of the state convention to Grand Rapids. Plaintiffs allege that Hoekstra has violated state committee bylaws by acting outside his authority as chair. They have filed suit against Hoekstra, the state committee, its secretary, Angela Gillespie, although Gillespie apparently, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, apparently concurs in the relief sought by the plaintiffs. According to plaintiffs, they will suffer irreparable harm by having to choose which convention to attend, the one in Detroit previously scheduled by the party, or the one in Grand Rapids scheduled by its new chair. Because if they attend the wrong one, their votes for their party's nominee for president and for delegates at the national convention will not be credentialed or counted. In their complaint, they seek declaratory injunctive relief. They also move for a temporary restraining order enjoining defendants from holding a convention at any other venue than Huntington Place in Detroit. Plaintiffs argue they meet the standards for preliminary injunction, blah, blah, blah. The court declines invitation to enjoin defendants from holding a state convention in Grand Rapids because there has been an insufficient showing of irreparable harm or of the likelihood of success on the merits. The Kent County Circuit Court injunction invalidates the actions of the previous chair. Karamo has filed an emergency appeal seeking a stay of that injunction. One of her attorneys in that appeal is Daniel J. Hartman, who is also the attorney in this action, as well as one of the named plaintiffs. In the appeal filing, Karamo specifically states that the Kent County injunction, quote, voids a previously noticed MIGOP convention of delegates in Detroit, scheduled for March 2nd. Defendant's motion to stay, et cetera, et cetera. Earlier today, the Court of Appeals denied the motion for stay. Earlier today. Appeal denied. Thus, there seems to be no confusion or need for dueling conventions. By Karamo's lawyer's own statements, one of whom is a named plaintiff in this action, the Detroit convention has been voided. And plaintiffs acknowledge that the president chair has scheduled the convention to be held in Grand Rapids. Plaintiffs are seeking relief from this court that has already been effectively denied by the Michigan Court of Appeals. At this point, unless the Michigan Supreme Court intervenes, the question of where to attend this Republican state convention seems to have been resolved by other courts. An injunction from this court would only add confusion rather than clarity, which is what they were seeking. Accordingly, the plaintiff's motion for TRO is hereby denied, and no show cause for issuance of a preliminary injunction will issue. Not a final order. Doesn't close the case. And that was in
Adam. The last page is something really important. There's two really important pieces. So
okay.
Did
I skip it?
Yeah. Well, no, it was at the very, very end because it's kind of important. What time was that issued?
4:15 p.m. on Thursday.
On Thursday. So on Friday, when Kristina's team was messaging the convention's still on in Detroit, they had known that they had already lost this case. Whereas since this was an ex parte motion taken presumably without service, because they probably didn't, the only person they were probably able to serve is Angela. Basically
really working for the
didn't know it existed. They suspected it, I suppose, but they didn't get a chance to respond or anything. And the judge says, "No, it's like judge is like a center fielder. I got it. Don't worry about it." And so, not only did they lose on Tuesday, and they knew they lost on Tuesday, they turned around and filed this case on Wednesday. The judge dismissed it on Thursday, which is record time. Dan Hartman, who in this says he is acting as the attorney and a plaintiff, which again, there's a saying in law that says only a fool has, or if a lawyer represents himself, he has a fool as a lawyer and a client. So he was an attorney who counted on the fact the judge wouldn't find the Court of Appeals ruling because he put in his pleading something that was directly contradicted by something he put in the Court of Appeals pleading. So those two things put together are remarkable. That you tried to hide this all the way through middle of the day, I think, on the first. And once it came out that this lawsuit that this was just on the cusp of being filed was already thrown out, it was then and only then that you announced, well, I guess Huntington is off then.
It's amazing. Stephen Gothal asks, how is it the Amway did not have any previous reservations for 13 of its large ballrooms? Wedding receptions and the like are scheduled months in advance. This seems very suspect.
No,
Stephen, you got us, Stephen. This is a conspiracy.
They had another convention.
There was a wedding.
There was one. It was, I was talking to the lady, it was like a plant convention, like
a floral convention.
Yeah, floral convention.
And
so
a wedding.
And
and
a
they
wedding.
were loving it. They're like, "What are you guys doing?" And I said, "Oh, that's weird. What are you doing?" And they were having a good old time. So that is completely wrong, 100% wrong.
I saw
Yeah,
a
the
woman
Emily's
in
a
a
big
wedding
place.
dress. There was a wedding.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good.
Did you say Harry Stawicki was a plaintiff in that up there?
I believe so. Yeah. Hold on.
That's funny because him and Ruth Sorokin were on my budget committee when Kristina was still in power. That man never said a thing ever.
Yeah.
He sat silent all the time.
Harry Sawicki in his official capacity as a state committee member for the 12th congressional district.
Yeah, him and Ruth was a big time KK apologist, but Harry never said a thing, never pushed back and anything, never did anything, and now he's willing to put his name on a plaintiff. I find that quite interesting.
I know some of the
Mark
plaintiffs
Ashley
were from
Price says-
Sheboygan, but it was interesting that it was filed in Sheboygan of all places too. Go Sheboygan Tea Party!
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, no, they were clearly. It's funny, they were clearly trying to judge shop because most
Gothier
counties
has
up
good
north, they probably don't even have their own circuit judge. It's for true, even like northern lower Michigan. Well, they'll share one, so they were clearly judge shopping, and the judge wanted nothing to do with it. So they thought they were slick and they were going to file this last minute lawsuit and they were going to win. And how many times can you follow Jim Coppus, Robert Owens, and Dan Hartman off a legal cliff? I just want to know, is there a limit to how many times you take legal advice from these people?
Probably
Well,
be
if they're
more, but
working pro bono, you can basically sue people, lawsuit till your heart's content, I guess. Until they start giving you bills, what's stopping you?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we talked about, someone said, what's going to go on in Kent County between now and June? Is the team Karamo going to continue these lawsuits? And I said, probably not, because this is the time where you take depositions. So when you have who's paying you, Jim Coppus, who's paying you, Robert Owens, who's paying you, Dan Hartman, those are reasonably calculated to provide admissible evidence, and those are questions you cannot avoid, period. And, they're not going to want to sit for that. Jennifer Stanford's not going to want to sit for that. Dan Bonamy's not going to want to sit for that. So I just have this suspicion that lawsuit might go away.
Real quick, Mark Ashley Price says, as long as Trump wins the presidency again, I'm okay, which is a good point to come back to because, by the way, folks, for all the people complaining about the disenfranchised delegates, who cares? I mean, seriously, Trump won. The national delegates, a few of the wackos got through, but that's Trump's problem. That's his campaign's problem to deal with. They'll be fine. You have the RNC committee man that was a blowout for Rob Steele. I didn't have any real particular preference on the national committee woman. The last one didn't do anything for 4 years. So at the end of the day, who gives a shit? The only reason I went to convention, frankly, was because we were worried that they're going to try that crazy stuff they were talking about doing, this big convention of delegates where they're going to reinstall Kristina, expel all the state committee members that voted to remove her, pass this insane Marxist-Leninist constitution that we talked about on the last program last weekend with Scott, and then cancel the primaries and all this other lunacy. And now this is all going to start falling away very quickly because the spell's broken. Kristina's out. And actually, with that, I do want to go to Todd because Todd, you were on the state committee and they had a meeting. The state committee had a meeting after the convention. And this is something that another thing Karamo's people were hyping up was that this is going to be this is going to be their revenge time because guess what, folks? Kristina supporters have the majority on the state committee, and now they're going to take their vengeance out on Hoekstra. So how'd that go, Todd? How'd that go for them?
It went extremely well, actually, for us. There's 104 members there, and not that many proxies. I saw a handful of KK supporters that just sat there and listened. But Melinda, she chaired the meeting because Pete's an intelligent man and knows that's her strength. And I'm going to assume it's not Pete's. I don't think Pete's probably dealt with Robert's Rules of Order much in the last, lifetime. But we kind of pushed through it real quick. We voted on the binding resolution right away, which pretty much killed all of their arguments about the different buildings and whatnot. But there was three men were standing up, Joel Studebaker, Ken Byer, and a gentleman I didn't know. Kim Harris was right next to him. They were being kind of loud and boisterous. But other than that, it went real well because Melinda did not let them bog the meeting down at all. She's very professional. She stood strong. And once the meeting was over, it was over. They got up and left, and everybody else mingled. And say the meeting, maybe lasted 20, 30 minutes. It was very quick and efficient.
Awesome. One thing that was not so
I have
quick and
some video
efficient.
of that when Joel and Ken were standing up. I was just sent it, and I'm gonna cut that together and put that out probably tonight or tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean, I stood up and said something to Kim Harris in a rather gruff tone, and I apologized to Pete for it afterwards. But Kim Harris had me physically removed from a meeting on the 19th in Three Rivers for pushing back on Kristina on some of her lies. And literally 4 big gentlemen escorted me out of the building, and they were acting a lot more disruptive than I was at that meeting. And Kim was getting all hot and bothered, and I stood up and said something. And I decided shortly after that I'm done engaging with them. I am not arguing with them anymore. I don't have to acknowledge them anymore. It's done. It's over. The truth is out there. If they refuse to see it, then that's their problem, not mine.
On Rumble, Charlotte Cosmic says, let's make sure. Anyway, I was going to read Dennis Marburger's. Yeah, the Sheboygan Tea Party is famous for outstanding people, Stephanie. There you go. So I want to bring in Patty and Matt to talk about. We had our own district caucus as well. It was not quite as energetic as some of the other ones were, but a very strange thing happened at our district caucus. Something I absolutely did not see happening at all, but there is an interesting fella that some of us in Southeast Michigan have heard of. If you don't know, it's this gentleman. His name is James Chapman. And I first heard of him, I think, when this story came out. This was in 2020. There was a huge protest against the lockdowns. And of course, the media focused on just this one gentleman, James Chapman, pictured here with a naked doll hanging from a noose. And of course, you see that is this whole. And then keep in mind, folks, this was the biggest protest in America against the lockdowns in Lansing, which I think set the stage for protests that happened all over the country very, very quickly after that. And so this was a huge embarrassment for everybody. You can see how he captured the media's attention. Turns out he was also a candidate for office. So he was also doing some terrible damage to the Republican Party back then. By the way, Jonathan Chapman in the chat emphasizes he has not the ball kicker and no relation. But so he's running for state representative. That's always a fun thing for the Republicans have to cover. And he was carrying American flag attached to a fishing rod with an unclothed brown-haired doll hanging from a noose, which apparently was supposed to signify Gretchen Whitmer. It turns out the guy's got a little bit of a history. He was found guilty in 1990 of assault with intent to do great bodily harm, less than murder, and a firearms charge. Was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Also put on probation for a stalking charge in 2015. Sentenced to 6 months in jail in 2018 after being found guilty of resisting a police officer. And the Court of Appeals opinion summarizing the incident noted Chapman argued with and attempted to stab an acquaintance at a house in Van Buren Township, eventually drove into Belleville Lake in an attempt to evade police. And of course, he became known much more recently, as people are talking about, the ball kicker, which of course was that event that happened in Clare County this past year, in which he kicked a man in the balls. I guess those charges are still pending. Anyway, I guess because of all that, some people who just don't feel safe around this guy for some inconceivable reason, I don't know, decided to suspend his voting privileges in the Wayne 6th. And apparently the secretary of the Wayne 6th, a guy named Nathan Morris, decided this is a guy that we want to honor and to keep in our party. We don't want to lose guys like James Chapman. So he moved to have Chapman instated as an alternate who would be elevated and became a voting delegate in the Wayne 6th, or I'm sorry, the Big Six, the 6th District Committee. The vote was overwhelming, by the way, and I'll forgive those who were running for national delegate and didn't speak in opposition, but nobody spoke in opposition about any of the stuff, that maybe the party of law and order shouldn't be promoting, rewarding, elevating, a convicted, violent maniac, a guy who, and I've seen him in person recently. Very, very, very intimidating to be near because he's a dangerous lunatic with a violent criminal history. Daniel says it barely exceeded the 2/3 necessary. Well, that's good. Unfortunately, they did get 2/3, and there was a lot of acclamation. The people that promoted him were very, very, very proud of themselves. Because that's the way. Huh?
They were. They most certainly were.
Yeah, but I mean, and Scott, this goes. I mean, is there any more perfect exemplification of the Marxist ideology and tactics than elevating a convicted violent criminal in a room and getting their people to actively promote this guy? And by the way, I can tell you, folks, I sent out an email blast the night before because an email went around announcing they were going to do this. And so they knew who this guy was, in case anybody had maybe forgotten, because, it wasn't like Nathan Morris had the candor to disclose all these facts that were very well known about who this James Chapman fellow was. But yeah.
Well, and let's just be clear. There were two things that was said there that people need to know that they're wrong and why. The first one was to fail to seat him would be a violation of the law.
They made this ludicrous claim.
Yes, and it was claimed that me in particular and Patty in particular, we broke the law by failing to allow him to attend their county convention. That is 100% wrong. If anybody picks up a piece of paper and reads something and takes their own meaning to it and says, this is what the law is, you've just explained to me that you don't know what lawyers do for a living. Okay? The original Hype Manus case was about, wait for it, the seating of a delegate in 1988. And the court said when the law has the statute, Michigan statutes have one rule, and when party rules have another rule, party rules get to decide because you get to pick who's a member of your organization, especially when it's a political party. That's freedom of association. Okay? That particular provision is blatantly unconstitutional under Hype Manus. I was asked, well, how if it's unconstitutional, how come it's still on the website? And I said, it doesn't work that way. Parts of the law that are unconstitutional still are available on the website. Number one, it is
Michigan
not unlawful for a party, a county party, to decide who their members are. Don't believe me? You can believe the judge in the, wait for it, the Kalamazoo County case. Hello, Kelly. How you doing? Where she picked her members pursuant to
and it's so obvious these people are fully aware of this stuff too, because they cite these same things constantly themselves.
Right. Just don't want to, the thing is, it's a complete lack of humility. You have no idea what you're doing. You know there's lawyers around you, and instead you say, I'm going to read it myself and I'm going to tell you what the law. And you said that in front of a large group of people. And that's personally quite offensive. That we broke the law. We certainly did not. Second of all, go
ahead.
I was saying, the second one was our bylaws didn't allow us to do it. It did. Our bylaws allowed us to kick him out because he is a two-time felon looking at his third conviction that involved a physical altercation with the head of the Clare County GOP at a meeting in Clare. So do we have the right to kick him out? You bet we do. In light, when we chose not to, he came in and professed his innocence, and we said, okay, we're going to suspend you until your court case is done. And when he comes back guilty or innocent, so there's only two options, we'll reconsider it at that point. That was in, I think, early September, because he had a court case scheduled for late September.
We suspended him in, it was May.
August? I remember before that. But anyway, he had a court case.
April or May. It was at the Northville meeting.
Yeah, I don't know.
One of the Northville
before that. So he had a pending court case. So what did this guy do? What is the most predictable thing that would happen? He skipped it. He didn't show. That was September.
Imagine that.
He just
It's
Didn't
almost like these
show.
people just don't think the law applies to them. It's so funny. They all have
It's
the same
weird. And then
attitude.
because you understand, he deems himself a patriot. And when you deem yourself
Yeah.
a patriot, all these laws don't apply because they're all by criminals and
It's like-
communists and whatever.
It's like
And
the end justifies their means, like that whole left wing philosophy there.
yeah,
Well, anyway, so as it turns out, Hema was elected to the RNC, which I presume means that she will have to resign from the 6th Congressional District Committee. And sometimes
and the Wayne 6th
and
as
probably
well.
in the county committee as well. No
Well,
one's ever held those positions concurrently, and
Yeah.
that's with
Well,
Rob being in the 6
sometimes-
years.
sometimes when a committee changes leadership, sometimes you can go back and you revisit your logo, your design, your image, and you kind of rework things. So I just thought, maybe someone wants to revisit their logo. I came up with a new logo for the 6th Congressional District Committee. They apparently love this. They love this guy so much. So why not? Why not update their logo to reflect their membership? I'm just suggesting it. You can totally do that.
A question about when the RNC committee men and women take over, because I saw from the list that was on the MRP website that Hema would be a guest, or she was an alternate, or she was a delegate, like an invited delegate, or there was something. So do they not take their position until like next year? Like when is it that it takes effect? What's the date?
I don't think that was very clear, and I read the RNC rules, and I didn't think it was very clear because what I read made it sound like it was after the July convention, but that doesn't make any sense because I know of the 16 delegates that are selected by the primary, 3 of those people are chair, national committee man, national committee woman, and it wouldn't make sense that would be Kathy Burden, who may or may not live in Tennessee, attending the RNC convention on behalf of Michigan. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I presume that it's earlier, but I have not gotten any confirmation.
Yeah, because it says President Donald J. Trump delegates, and then it lists, Chairman Pete Hoekstra, Kathy Burden, Rob Steele, and then it goes into the U.S. representatives, and Hema is an alternate. So I'm just really thinking that they're not effective yet.
It's an open question, but I mean, I would imagine you probably start to have those duties like right away, especially because there's all kinds of issues going on. I don't know, maybe somebody files a credentials challenge with the RNC. It's possible. And I would imagine that the new committee woman has to resolve that. So that probably, probably something they had to do. But anyway, Adam, your logo making skills are immaculate.
There's a question for Matt in the chat from Ronald Matty. Would a motion to table have been able to stop the vote on having James Chapman, recognized?
You could have done parliamentary procedure at that point in a lot of different ways, Ron, to your point. But what had gone on was he stepped up, made outrageous and outlandish claims. And people more than anything else, anyone that attended the convention wanted one thing: smoothness. They want to pick their people and they want to go home. So now we're introducing this. Could there be a lot of gone through parliamentary things? Yeah, sure, no problem. I get it. I understand. But why was it done? Why was it allowed at all? It's ridiculous. And to Adam's point, the point about it is you have a person who's being used as a caricature to make you look stupid, to make you look like you're bad people, like you're criminals, like all kinds of these bad things. And instead of saying, wow, this has got someone got nothing to do with, you don't want this guy anywhere near. When he was originally suspended, we sent out a press release immediately. And I made sure that the members of the media corrected. So they said, this guy is a member of I said, no, he was. He has been suspended indefinitely. And what that does is that spins down the news story, right? Here's this clown from locally getting in trouble, right? It was, the way it was handled was poorly. But the subject matter was just atrocious.
What's interesting about this story is that it really kind of underscores the effectiveness of their methods in a kind of a mob kind of situation, and also it underscores how important it was that and how good a decision it was to hold these caucuses in Grand Rapids instead of in Detroit.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
was
That
more
was a
separation
smart point.
in every way. It was just I mean, Kristina was trying to make it into a firehouse convention, state convention, and put them all in the same room so that they would have even more control over the mob. And because they know that in this group setting, it doesn't take that many people. It just takes, where like you said, Matt, they just wanted to get out of there. They just wanted to get it done. They didn't want the conflict. And so when you have people that don't want the conflict, they're just going to say, fine, whatever, and often what they've said, fine, whatever to is actually turns out to be quite dangerous. That's how Kristina got elected in the first place.
Yeah, one of the techniques that they use too is like they sent out this accusation that Matt did something improper at the convention. They love to play these cards, even though these people lie, cheat, and steal every single time they have the opportunity to break the rules. They always do. But
Suspend
I mean, one of the things
bylaw.
that suspend the bylaws.
That's what they tried. That's what they tried to do at the county convention. The same group of people.
It's the same theory. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. A bylaw has a rule that says you must have 2/3 of a vote or 4/5 of a vote. You don't magically find some hole and say, we're going to suspend the bylaws. It's not a thing. Nobody in any sense would think that. But the question was, who told you that? Who told you that was going to work? The answer is the same group of people that told you that Kristina was the chair, that you should go to Battle Creek, that you should go to Houghton Lake, that the court case was going to turn things around. The same person that lied to you all the way through came up with this idea. And guess what? It wasn't true.
Yep. All right. I got a quick point. I want to read some chats and maybe we'll start wrapping this up soon, unless there's something you guys think I've missed. But, to your point, Matt, though, and I feel like I've said this on the show before, but this is now the third time there was an event on January 6th, and there was the event on the 20th. It's incredible to me first of all, how skillfully people came together to properly remove Kristina Karamo. To the point that they did every single thing exactly right. And on top of that, he still wouldn't have succeeded had not the Karamo people also done everything exactly wrong. Like all they do is show up for these meetings, and this wouldn't have happened.
Well, Scott could talk a lot about this. Scott, talk about the role of maintaining the narrative in the people that you've done your research on, because that for me was the reason why they couldn't come in the building. Narrative. The reason why they couldn't go to Grand Rapids. Narrative. They had to maintain the narrative. So you could probably talk a lot really accurately about that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reason why they're still talking about the disenfranchisement. That's the narrative, and it's pretty effective. That's why they were talking about the bylaws for 6 weeks, because that was something that they could try to argue, even though they didn't really have legal basis for it. They could argue that in people's minds and keep the attention away from the reason why she was removed and all the malfeasance and everything, all of the issues that caused people to want to remove her in the first place. You talk about the bylaws instead. And, that's something that, we can argue with that, but when we argue with that, then we're not talking about the reasons why. And now, instead of what they don't want us talking about is the reality that at the state committee meeting last night, it really underscored they don't have the numbers anymore. They're done. They don't have the numbers. They don't have the 60 state committee members that could that they said that they claimed to have had on January 13th. They don't have it. They probably have 45. And by once Sandifer and Gillespie are removed, and now there's Dan Hartman's no longer an at-large, and you got Lori Skibo and Joel Studebaker. You got Dan Bottomy, all these people that have at-large positions on the state committee, that they're not going to have those anymore. And so that's really, and also that it went pretty well. Pete Hoekstra did a lot to try to, make amends and bring these people in. I was in District 9 when Warren stood up and he was raising his hand when the issue was, when Deb Ross, who was chairing that meeting, brought the issue up. He was raising his hands. He was standing in the middle of the aisle. You tell she didn't want to call on him, but she did. And he said, we don't think that it's the delegates' fault that the delegates should pay for what their chairs did in disenfranchising them. And we want all the delegates to have a voice. And that's the way the Republican Party works. We have bylaws, and those bylaws say that, well, if there's a majority, they can do something. But what they were wanting to do is to pass a constitution that says that they control the majority, that because they need control. And I think in every way. I talked to Pete briefly yesterday, and he said that this is just a huge success because really the media the media came, they wanted to show infighting. They wanted to see they wanted to see people fighting each other and kicking each other in the balls, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it was
this chat real quick. Ron says, my biggest problem with the big conspiracy, if Lavity was so smart to organize to pull off the multi-year plan, how is he so dim not to have 20 supporters show up on January 6th? To which Don Beatty says, because he underestimated us, that I think is probably a good part of it. The other thing too, I would say to that though, is that they had built this, and Kristina by that point, and some of her other people had gotten to the point where they could not recognize the legitimacy of the people that organized the meeting on the 6th. And they didn't think they wouldn't find some kind of weird parliamentary way that the bylaws would be followed, that, and you saw them try this in court, like every little thing they tried to say, so-and-so didn't pay dues. They tried all these tricks. None of them worked, but they thought there was going to be some other way to do it. And I think they were caught in a strategic trap where they realized they couldn't send their people to those meetings without acknowledging the legitimacy of the concerns against Kristina. And so they just had no good plan for it. Let's see.
So they suppressed their own vote is what they did. They suppressed their own vote.
Yes.
Yep.
And Adam, can we
Dwayne
just
Zantok
say,
made a long, go ahead, Kelly.
well, if they would have showed up yesterday, that HEMA would not have been elected. HEMA would not have won.
And they would have gotten their people in the 1st to go to Milwaukee, and they might have gotten their people in the 4th or the 9th or all these other places to go to Milwaukee. Is that not a thing? Do they not care? Because it wasn't just they suppressed their own vote, Todd. They disenfranchised their own voters. They disenfranchised their precinct delegates by not getting in the car.
Right.
Well,
Yep.
Matt, you'll be happy to know that they've alleged more lawsuits are coming over the the different slates of electors, at least in the 1st. So you'll have more work to do.
Good luck. They've had a tremendous record in court so far, so I'm sure that the crack legal team of Hartman and a bunch of I don't knows is going to really pull this one off.
Yeah, it was kind of cool in the 1st too. The UP really did show up in the largest numbers. I know that's relative to the number of delegates we had, but they're pretty small delegations, and they elected a lot of Trump electors because they had the numbers. And probably in a normal convention, the bigger downstate counties might have, won the day, but because their numbers showed up, they had a lot of Trump electors elected in the 1st. They all seem like nice people. Everybody was there for the same reason. So it was cool. But yeah, it's interesting. It kind of hurts my heart because one of my really dear friends was elected in Houghton Lake as a Trump elector, and no one loves Trump more than her. But I'm not sure if maybe it was just symbolic. I want to talk to her and see if it was symbolic or if she, is really going to think she's going. I don't know,
Yeah. Stephanie, I want to have you on the show again with one thing, because we're not going to get to talking about, I got some great video from the 1st district meeting. We played a small clip of it before the show started, and I wanted to go through that with you in more depth, but we're going to start running out of time soon. And I got to read some chats here. Julie Sanderson says, is it possible HEMA will be removed as winner for some reason? My answer is no, because that ship has sailed. There's no do-overs, but what do you think, Matt?
No, the argument they made two arguments. One is she needs to be elected by a majority, not a plurality. But when you have a vote for 3 and you approve rules that allow one ballot, that's implicit that you're accepting the highest vote getter after that one ballot. There was no provision for a revote, unlike state convention where Kristina was elected, where there were, I think, 3 votes or 4 votes.
Right.
So
the
no
rules were.
cold water. The other argument that Bernadette made was, well, if Ken Byer and his box of information and Dan Bonamy and his box of information, if those votes are added, then Bernadette wins. That those are not flying. Sorry, those are not legitimate conventions. And to Steph's point, you got people who were picked to go to Milwaukee to represent President Trump and sit there. And I've never been there. I'm looking forward to it. I'm a delegate in the 6th. But that could be a good time for somebody, an experience for somebody. And maybe they bring their kids, or, maybe people see that and are inspired by it. And instead, you can't go because Dan Bonamy said, don't go. And you listen to Dan Bonamy, and he gave you the wrong information again and again and again. And the only question I have is, at what point do you stop listening to these guys?
Yeah. Dwayne Zantop has a story about James Chapman apparently talking about showing up at the township meeting with a chainsaw, and he would take care of things, talking about local government. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy with a violent history who, of course, is going to make threats repeatedly. This is the way Marxists operate, and they love crazy people. That was what all those riots in the summer of 2020 were all about, and that's their nature, folks. I mean, these people that call themselves Christians, the only thing I see Christian in them is the proverbial dog that returns to his own vomit. I mean, this is going to do the same thing over and over again. These lawsuits, these screaming, the yelling. It's incredible.
The fight is going to continue through August, and they're on a full court press to recruit more delegates, and they're looking for more low information delegates that are angry that they can manipulate. And I think that the delegates for Trump thing, I think, is brilliant, because it may be targeting some of the same kind of people that are angry about what's happening in this country and even low information, but it's going to inform them, it's going to educate them, it's going to train them, provide them with real training. And I think that is an outstanding thing, and I hope that really succeeds.
Agree.
Yeah.
They're going to come hard. They're just going to come hard. Sorry, Steph, to go after recruiting delegates. And you know what? We need to do the same thing.
And the thing I always go back to with these folks is there's no magic fix. Like, you're not going to pass a new Republican Constitution or have a convention of states and just fix everything magically. You have to do the work, and the work is like what Adam always says: going out in your precinct, knocking the doors, finding out what's important to people, and getting them to vote, mobilizing them for action. And it doesn't take a lot of people once you get them on your side, but that's all forgotten now. And they just want to rewrite the Declaration of Independence and pass these massive sweeping changes, and the people are really forgotten. So let's go out and knock some doors and do the things that precinct delegates are supposed to do, find out what matters to our voters, and then I think we can enact real change quicker than this type of stuff,
Yeah, I found that fascinating. I was invited to talk on Trucker Randy's show right after Dan Bonamy talked about it. And I had the Constitution up and I'm ready to choose to the pieces. And he says, wow, this wasn't a real Constitution. This wasn't what they really intended. I'm like, oh, really? It wasn't? Yeah, that's so. And it was in the process of throwing Caucus and Owens under the bus because they knew it took people 5 seconds to see how idiotic this is. Later on, Dan Hartman wants to have a discussion because I think all of the principles need to be understood. And my only thanks is that I don't have to listen to these clowns anymore. I don't have to waste a minute of my time hunting it down. But man, it was a bad document, as you guys went through on the show.
Yeah, apologies to Jonathan Chapman because I brought up this comment from Russ. Another trespassing, another crime of James Chapman. But when you don't say the first name, poor old Jonathan there ends up having to no relation, not me, different person. Jamie
Okay,
Thompson.
yeah, but he was at that Hoekstra event, and everybody was like loving him. Hey, how you doing? Like
Right.
he was like, you know, the co-chair of the state party or something. It was
It's incredible.
absurd.
I ran into him at an event, at an RFK Jr. event, and suddenly his people seemed to have found out who he was, and he was removed. But anyway, Jamie Thompson says.
Oh, so they removed him, but we don't.
Yeah, I mean, for when I saw him in the room, I would have assumed he'd paid. But apparently, he just broke in. I don't know. Maybe he did pay. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I have a feeling he didn't. Jamie says, if we stop giving the wackadoodles a platform, they will eventually go away. The public only sees what they show them. I think a lot of them will be going away very quickly because the spell will have been broken and they'll start to wake up to what's happened. Some of them will walk away because, frankly, their moment is over. They are. There's no more the precinct delegates can do. Their term is up. The only thing that they can do at this point is, and some will, I mean, no question, Samantha Strayer is out recruiting precinct delegates right now as we speak. All you can do is out-organize them. That's just the way that goes, folks. That's what the precinct delegate race is all about, is for who controls the GOP. That just kind of happens. But a lot of them are going to just give up and go away. That's just what happens.
I think that a lot of the reason why they just chose to disenfranchise their own people by holding these alternate meetings is because they wanted to hold. They knew that there's going to be a lot of discouragement, like you just said, but they wanted to hold on to these people. They wanted to continue to indoctrinate them and have something of a seed that they could try to continue to build from. So because those meetings clearly were indoctrination meetings, like it was all about just rah cheerlead, stay in the cult kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, when you have that on your next show, when you're going to discuss the District 1 with Dan Bonamy, definitely invite me on that, because I watched that video today, and there's several things in there I'd like to debunk with him being the budget chair and me being in the budget committee with him. So he said a lot of half truths and just flat out, misinformation.
Todd, I have a whole list.
Right.
So we'll probably plan on doing that sometime midweek. I don't know, maybe tentatively Tuesday or Wednesday or something. We'll get you guys back together. We'll do that one of these days. All right, guys. I think that's it for us for tonight, unless there's something I forgot to talk about at the convention. Other than that, but otherwise, I think we've. 90 minutes. It's almost as long as the convention itself was. No, it's not. But some district. All right. Anything else before we sign off?
Well, I just got a text that said the new RNC committee men and women are sworn in at the end of the July convention. So when we all
I find it
go,
very hard to believe because they are delegates themselves to the national convention, are they not? Maybe Matt doesn't know.
I think they're saying that the previous people are the delegates to that. Like that's their final hurrah or
that's
something.
what I think too, Patty.
Yeah, the only question is that with respect to Kathy Burden, the allegation shouldn't live in Michigan anymore. So I don't
Well, that's her vacation home in Tennessee, and I think her residency is still here. But
I still thought that they were delegates serving from that first convention.
What?
I could be wrong.
Text Rob Steele and ask him.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll get that question answered.
They should know when their job starts, I would have guessed, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Something to ponder tonight, Matt. I did get a text from a delegate, and Dan Hartman was an elected delegate to convention from Emmett County, I believe.
So he was in Emmett County, and
Yes.
they violated their own rules because on whatever was February 15th, the court had not yet ruled. On February 15th, if Dan was right, he would have been an at-large delegate and ineligibly voted upon, like our state committee members were. And I think it was 7+1, I think, or it was something, or in our county it was 4, 5. And he somehow managed to put himself in as an elected delegate, even though the court had not yet ruled. So weird.
Man, this is why I never talk to lawyers.
These things were all. I mean, and I will never profess to be a great attorney in this field. There are plenty that a lot of them are on our side, and they do a great job. The team that was around on January 6th was this massive team, and there were guys like Tim Ross, who's not a lawyer, who's just as knowledgeable as me, or if not more, on a lot of these things. And these flaws are so obvious. When we talk about the video, and I'd love to be on to do it because Dan goes into the court case again, and it was just, my God, lie after lie after lie after lie. And what he's failing to do is the other side put their truths in writing with documentation and said, no, here's the truth. And again, control the narrative, right? Does Dan share those pieces of paper with the first district? He does not, because they refute everything he was saying.
Yeah. Holly Hughes, who was herself a national committee woman, says the RNC follows the presidency. Trump has to be nominated and accept the new RNC member starts their term. There you go. Right. Thank you, Holly. Appreciate it. All right, guys. I think that's going to do us for this evening. We will get everyone back together soon, and we'll have some fun with looking at the most recent LARPing event that happened in Houghton Lake, and we'll go through the video, and Matt can break down, and Todd and perhaps Steph as well, the lies line by line as we go through it. So until then, as always, thanks for all you guys do for liberty. Sorry for anyone whose comments in the chat we couldn't read. There's just a lot of them these days. That's just kind of how that goes. But all right, folks, until then, thanks for all you do for liberty. Peace.